seems so long ago that we last talked about the cancelled Game of Thrones prequel series, Bloodmoon. In fact, this channel had less than 100 subscribers when we did. But over the last few days, several photos from behind the scenes, many of which are hair and makeup tests, have come to surface thanks to Wake the Dragon on Twitter. I know when HBO announced the cancellation of Bloodmoon and that they had greenlit House of the Dragon instead, there were many who were shocked and caught off guard that HBO would spend $30 million on a pilot for a project that was never going to see the light of day. I tried to be excited about Bloodmoon, and I even did make some videos about it, but something about the concept never quite sat right with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this project was going to be a dud, especially if you wanted to bring back the audience the last season of Game of Thrones lost. A White Walker's long night-based show was not the path to go down, and for me, that was always inherently the issue with Bloodmoon. With the long night and White Walkers being such a key part of it, the lackluster conclusion of Game of Thrones sapped much of the enthusiasm for many viewers to watch a whole prequel with that as the key backdrop. I maintain a spin-off set in the Age of Heroes is a good idea, and there are so many stories you could tell. There was a gem of an idea at the heart of Bloodmoon, but the time was not right for it, and I think HBO knew that. And well, if what we know about the plot is anything to go by and how much of a mess the script was, then it could have very well have been the last nail in the coffin for A Song of Ice and Fire on TV, if the pilot had progressed into a full series. It was a bold move cancelling a $30 million project, one that took a lot of courage on HBO's part. I would encourage you to actually go and watch The Dragon Demands Bloodmoon videos. He covers basically everything we need to know about it, as well as a lot of leaked info about the plots, especially the more questionable writing and plot elements. I think the fact that anything about this project went radio silent and all we have ever seen is the initial leaked set photos from 2019 says a lot about it, especially with these new leaked photos and what they suggest about the artistic direction of Bloodmoon and where it was heading, and how HBO might have wanted it forgotten. From trusted and verified leak sources, we do know some of the details of the plot of Bloodmoon. The short version is Bloodmoon was set during the Age of Heroes, and from what we know of the pilot, would have featured a Stark princess travelling to Casterly Rock to marry the last Casterly. During the bedding ceremony, there was to be a meteor shower, or impact that would perhaps be caused by magic. That would be the cause of the long night. The impact would kick up a lot of dust and debris into the atmosphere and give the moon a blood red hue, hence the name Bloodmoon. The White Walkers and undead were set to feature, as well as the Children of the Forest, but arguably, that is where the biggest controversy lies with Bloodmoon's core concept. From what we understand, the children were meant to be played by exclusively black actors, with them effectively being another race of native humans to Westeros prior to the First Men. At some point in the show, they were going to get cursed and slowly turn into the Children of the Forest we see in the main show. The intent was to use this as a retcon as to why there was an apparent lack of diversity in Westeros in the main show. I have a feeling it may have been this aspect of the plot that got the project cancelled. If not, it definitely didn't help at all. Needless to say, this pilot was a hot mess from start to finish, and while the initial concept might have worked, the writing seems to have been the biggest issue. If anyone would be interested, I did make a video a long time ago going over all the plot leaks in Bloodmoon and how it would impact the lore, but I never uploaded it. With a little bit of reworking, it might be something of interest to some people. But these new photo leaks, the first real leaks of behind the scenes material we have had from Bloodmoon, really sparked my interest. And not in a good way. When the initial set leaks happened back in 2019, you could clearly see HBO was spending a lot of money on this project. There were some very large and seemingly detailed sets made, perhaps with the intent they would be used long term, much like Castle Black in Game of Thrones. But now we have seen these behind the scenes pictures, I question now if the production quality was up to the standard HBO was expecting for $30 million. Most of the photos are of Naomi Watts in costume, specifically focusing on her hair, makeup and clothing, but we do also get a look at some of the sets and extras. Now, the way the First Men are described in the books come across as more Celtic or Bronze Age people. Remember, the First Men only written form of communication was runes left in trees and stone, and they weren't that technologically advanced. It was a much simpler existence. Well, the aesthetic for Bloodmoon seems to have been very different from what we would expect. It almost comes across as ancient Greek, or perhaps Roman to some extent. The most telling photo is the one, or what I think might be what's at a wedding feast, perhaps the Stark princess's wedding feast. As you can see in the background, we have a guard in bronze armor that, well, looks very ancient Greek, especially the helmet. Even the jewelry and things like cups seem to be more Roman or Greek influence than what the first men probably should have looked like. Then we have a picture of what's at what appears to be some kind of altar. If it is an altar or something like one, I have no idea who it would be for, given the first men worshipped the old gods, and this was well before the coming in the Andals, and thus the faith of the Seven. I thought it could perhaps be a crypt of some kind, I'm not sure. In a way, this picture and the general aesthetic of it gave me Delphi vibes. Delphi was an ancient Greek sacred precinct and the seat of major oracles who were consulted about important decisions throughout the ancient and classical world. Maybe that's what's happening in this scene, and the girl in the background is a proto-child of the forest, or an oracle-like figure Watts is seeking advice from. As I'm sat here editing this, we've had some new information and context to some of these photos, namely the shot of Naomi Watts in what appears to be some kind of temple. A storyboard artist named Adam Prescott has released some of the storyboards he worked on for Bloodmoon, specifically this temple scene. From it, we have learned that Watts' character was called Morven, and the room is in fact a sept for the faith of the Seven, which is, well, interesting to say the least. As we discussed earlier, the first men worshipped the old gods, with Bloodmoon being set just before the start of the Long Night and into the Long Night itself. So we should be thousands of years away from the Andal invasion, and thus the faith of the Seven in Westeros. It's really left me scratching my head about the direction they were going in and how they were going to be using the established law, which, given what we have seen, I don't think they'd be using it well. Yes, they could jump through some hoops to make it work, maybe make an argument that some Andals came thousands of years before, or elements of the religion made it across the Narrow Sea, but it's a bit of a stretch and a huge change. We then also have these shots of what I guess is inside Casterly Rock, and if you look at the carvings on the wall, again, the chariots and the riders come across very Greek. But why would they have gone down this very different path in terms of the visual concept of the show, when it goes against a lot of what we know about the First Men? I believe this was very much a stylistic choice and thematic choice. I suspect the way they were approaching the Age of Heroes, which is very much full of myths and legends, with people who may or may not have existed, as the Westerosi equivalent to the Greek myths and legends of the real world, with stories such as the Odyssey and the Iliad, and that they would really have delved into the magical side of the story, with lots of so-called mythical and lost creatures and people of Westeros. I think the cancellation of Bloodmoon really comes down to the writing, the controversial casting, and maybe even this general aesthetic not really working for what HBO and this mythological version of Westeros being far removed from what the audience are used to and expect to see. Yes, the Age of Heroes would greatly differ from the Westeros from the main show. However, I think maybe they went too far with how different they made it, removing any sense of familiarity. I do hope one day, unlike the original pilot for Game of Thrones, we get to see Bloodmoon's pilot, as I'm deeply curious about what the hell they were trying to do with it. But I ultimately think HBO were right to pivot towards something more familiar and more bankable like House of the Dragon. But I will end on this. At the very heart of Bloodmoon, there is this fantastic gem of an idea and a story to be told, just perhaps not in the way they were planning on telling it in Bloodmoon. With a bit of a reset and a new approach and a hell of a lot of development time, I do think some kind of show based around the First Men and the Long Night, exploring the mythical and magical side of Westeros, would be compelling to see.